Hello everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and we're going to talk football now, and the very recent announcement that Manchester City and their initial 2-year ban from European competition has now been lifted. This was the original reason was because they had deemed to have breached the regulations of financial fair play. Now I'm sure everybody knows what financial fair play is, but for anybody that doesn't know, financial fair play is basically a regulation and a limit on the amount of money that owners of a club can invest in their club to cover any kind of losses that the club may incur. So it's basically, if you have a billionaire owner, they can't just waltz in and spend money left, right and centre regardless of how much profit or how much debt the club is in, because that's unfair against other clubs, because not everybody can have a billionaire owner running their club. So that's the element or the theory, if you look, behind financial fair play. Now the original story of this, of course, was that emails had leaked from Manchester City through a German newspaper, and following a further investigation by UEFA, had given the indication that Manchester City had breached these rules, and the issue was that the owner, Sheikh Mansour, was somehow funded the majority of the club's annual sponsorship. So this raised suspicions that they weren't being true in the financial submissions that they were submitting to UEFA, and as mentioned before, that's of course not allowed, because you can't have the owner providing most of the funding of the club's revenue. So this is why sponsorship and image rights are so important to clubs, along with crowd revenue as well and television rights, because that provides a lot of their financial revenue. So that was the basic issue, and Manchester City of course denied this and appealed the decision when it was announced that the 2-year ban was sanctioned by UEFA. And following months and months of getting a legal team together, it of course has now been decided that the ban has been lifted. The original fine of 26.9 million has now been reduced to 8.9 million. So the overall decision by the Court of Arbitration of Sport was that there was inconclusive evidence to suggest that Manchester City had breached its regulations, though the fine has still been held of 8.9 million because Manchester City were found guilty of not being cooperative with the investigations that were held by UEFA. Now Manchester City have released a statement that the reason they weren't as cooperative because you're dealing with very highly confidential information regarding their financial dealings, and they didn't want to aid in having that kind of disclosed in the public domain. That's why they fought so hard behind it. But if we're being truthful here, 8.9 million, that's like 50p to Manchester City. That pays probably the wages of an academy player or a squad player, so for a year or two. So they're not really bothered by that fine. The major victory for them, of course, is having that 2-year ban lifted. So what does it mean for Man City? Well, of course, now a lot of their worries and concerns have gone away, because when the ban was initially announced, there was huge concerns over whether the players at Manchester City would stay, because we do know that the likes of David Silva are going to retire at the end of this season, and there were multiple players at the end of their contracts. There was a famous quote from Kevin De Bruyne, wasn't it, who said that he would review the position if the ban was upheld. So there were various players who, following De Bruyne's statement, were going to review their position if the ban was going to be upheld, because as we all know, these top players, they want Champions League football, and if you tell a club you're not going to be playing Champions League football for 2 years, that's going to make players kind of rethink what club they want to be playing for. And of course, when you've got top players such as Aguero and Sterling and De Bruyne, they're going to have no shortage of people in demand to attain their services, if you like. So Man City had a real concern here, and of course the other issue, of course, was Pep Guardiola, who I believe only has a year left on his contract. So again, would he stay? He did come out publicly and said he would stay regardless, but of course he has to do that. He has to show support for the club. He's not going to come out and say, well, I'm definitely going to leave at the end of the season if the ban is upheld. He wouldn't do that, right? Because we all know that Man City last season, they won the domestic treble. Prior to that, they won the Premiership and they also won the League Cup as well. So domestically, they've claimed dominion, but it was the Champions League. It's the Champions League that Pep Guardiola really wants. You know, he won it at Barcelona, but he failed to win it at Bayern Munich, despite the fact he done the domestic treble over there as well. So that Champions League is the one that he really wants to crack. So if you're telling him as well, just like the players, that he's unable to play in the Champions League for 2 years, that may make him rethink his decision. So that's really two major points of concern that have gone now for City. So now they can just kind of carry on and going about their business. They're very satisfied as well now because they can compete in the Champions League, because they're going to finish second. So of course now they're going to get that guaranteed Champions League money revenue coming in for the next 2 seasons, and no worries. So all good, all great if you're a City supporter, if you're part of Manchester City. You know, great news all alike for around you. So what are the ramifications going forward for the rest of football, for the rest of the Premier League? Well, it of course now means that the much coveted 5th spot in the Premier League that everybody was kind of itching and scrambling towards has now been voided now. So now it goes down to that elusive 4th space. And now we look at the table at the moment. So right now we have obviously Liverpool champions, Man City in second, we have Chelsea in third, and now we have Leicester in 4th. So the way it's running at the moment is Chelsea in third have 60 points, Leicester have 59, Man United have 58, Wolves have 55, and Sheffield United have 54. And of course now Man United, they play Southampton later on tonight, Monday evening. So after they play that match, everybody would have played 35 games with 3 remaining. So it's essentially down to these 5 teams here. I think now that rules out Tottenham's chances. I think they have 52 points now with 3 games left. It's very unlikely they're going to get within an inch of that top 4, because they really have to rely on the 5 teams above them to have just a complete shutdown and a sharp decline in form in order for them to pick up, and they'd have to win their next 3 games on the bounce to have any kind of chance. So I don't think that's unlikely. So it is going to be down to the 5 clubs. So when we look at it, Sheffield United have 54. Despite the fact they have picked up form recently, I don't see them really going on a big run, and again they're going to have to rely on the others failing as well. Wolves have 55, probably in the same position, I would say. So you're looking at really Chelsea, Leicester and Man United. So it's essentially going to be 2 out of those 3, isn't it? So we have to wait and see what will happen with Man United this evening against Southampton. If they beat Southampton, that will then give them 61, Chelsea 60, Leicester 59. So then the race will really hot up between those 3. So in the one sense, yeah, it's disappointing for clubs down there, especially Wolves and Sheffield United. You know, that big dream, that big opportunity of actually possibly getting into the Champions League football, you know, that could have been huge for them. Potentially that could have been the stepping stone for them to go on to greater things in the future. So that's cancelled out that option. But on the other hand, from a neutral perspective, I think it's great now, because it now means there's a real kind of urgency and a real kind of importance for the last remaining 3 games. Because I think when you're watching these Premier League games now, we saw already that Norwich have been relegated, and obviously Liverpool won the Premier League. The kind of top 3, top 4 kind of spoke for itself. So there were a few games that really didn't have a lot riding on them as such. You know, a lot of Liverpool games now, they're not going to really have a lot going for them, a lot riding on them. You know, they play Arsenal next week, that's a dead rubber game. So there are a few games that weren't really lacking importance, but now that we've had this news here, it's really going to provide another rush, another excitement for the rest of the Premier League games going forward. So from a neutral perspective, I think that's very good and exciting alike. But what we've also got to talk about, and I think what's even more important, is the image of FIFA and how they look now and the perception of them going forward, especially with the financial fair play. Now, the whole point of the financial fair play, as I mentioned before, was to crack down and to make sure that the big clubs owned by the billionaire owners just couldn't spend and outspend their rivals. Right? You want to try and keep a fairness of competition, right? Now, the problem we have here, whenever you take one of the big clubs to task, if you come out and say, right, we're going to sanction this ban on you, and then you end up not following it through, then what happens is you lose credibility. And now there's going to be a lot of skepticism amongst football personalities and football entities and football fans that really UEFA and the financial fair play, it doesn't really stand for anything. You can announce that you're going to ban this and sanction this and make out this punishment, but if you don't see it through, then it's not really going to hold water, and you're just going to look weaker in your position. Now, when the announcement initially came from the ban, I honestly thought that City, obviously through their appeals, they were going to get it reduced to a year. And the reason I thought they were going to get it reduced to a year, because I thought UEFA had to really stick strongly to try and enforce some sort of punishment, right? Because then if you enforce one of the biggest cash cows, if not the biggest cash cow in football within Man City, and you punish them severely for potentially breaching the financial rules, then that sends out a big message to other clubs to make sure that they get all their houses in order, or they're going to get dealt the same punishment as Man City. Well, now Man City have got it completely overturned. Next time you look to sanction another club, they're going to say, well, you didn't punish Manchester City, you gave them a free pass, you managed to clear them completely of any wrongdoing, so we expect the same treatment. Now, I understand it's not quite as clear cut as that. I understand each situation merits its own investigation and its own punishment if necessary. But again, it's just the perception of it. UEFA, whether it's through their own intention or not, they look weak now. They look weak, and people are not going to take them as seriously. They're not going to take financial fair play seriously, which is important, because financial fair play should be a huge entity and should be something that really should be enforced, and you should look to make sure that everybody can compete on the same level regardless of how much investment they've got going into the club. That's a huge element within football that should be upheld. But that kind of theory, that kind of concept, if you like, has been hugely damaged by this overturning that we've seen just now on today. So it's really interesting what's going to happen going forward now. The next time somebody else breaches a case going forward, what's going to happen? You know, we've seen various examples, and many people have pointed out. You remember Chelsea had a transfer ban for a year for, I think it was to do with younger players within their academy, and PSG, they had an investigation going place and they managed to get that overturned. AC Milan, I think, were banned for a year as well from competition. So it's, again, you have to look at this and say, well, if you're not going to hit the big clubs hard, the next time a smaller club gets hit hard, is that going to be fair? Is that going to be deemed to be fair? If, let's say, a smaller club gets accused of the same crime, if you like, of Manchester City, and they get banned for 2 years, the message that's going to send is that, well, the big clubs can get away with it, but if you're a smaller club and you don't have a billionaire owner behind you, you may not get so lucky in the judgment call. That's the perception. Even though I'm not saying, just to cover myself, that UEFA are corrupt, as would be the perception amongst many football fans and entities, that basically you just favour the big clubs, and you've got enough money, you can attain a big enough legal team, and they can overturn any decision, any accusation that's held against you. That's the kind of perception that's going to go on here. So it's going to be very interesting now to see what happens going forward, and what other various football figures and pundits come out and the kind of statements that they make going forward. But overall, just very great news for Man City. So they're essentially now, they're back on track. So I guess players like De Bruyne now, they don't have to reassess their position. They're happy now. They can kind of sign a contract extension for the next couple of years because they've got Champions League football guaranteed. Guardiola can be happy now. He can, of course, extend his contract because he's got Champions League football to look forward to for the next couple of years as well. So very happy for everybody involved within Manchester City, and obviously very disappointing if you're Wolves or Sheffield United, because it just makes that path to the Champions League a bit more difficult. If you're a neutral, as I mentioned before, you're more exciting now, because it means these last 3 games are going to be very exciting and very tense to watch, because you know there's one place or 2 places at stake for that Champions League qualification. So overall, those are my thoughts on Manchester City's ban being overturned. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What do you think this says about the perception of and the image of UEFA in general? Do you think now that financial fair play is just a complete kind of bust? Nobody takes it seriously anymore? Is it worth trying to uphold? Is it really worth us taking it seriously now if the big clubs can allegedly, and again, I say allegedly because we don't know, Manchester City very well have been very innocent and not guilty of anything that they've been accused of. So we have to bear that in mind. But do you feel as a football supporter now that football has taken a loss and this just means again the rich can just get by and do whatever they want and the smaller clubs are going to get hit? Or are you not as concerned about this? Are you just more worried about your own club and what they're doing, and you don't think this will have a larger impact going forward within the sport? So let me know what you think in the comments below, and I guess there'll be further more information because the Court of Arbitration of Sport, or CAS as they're known in various articles that I've been reading alike, they are going to disclose more details in the next upcoming days. So we'll get more in-depth reason as to why it was deemed that Manchester City didn't breach its regulations. So it may be worth doing another video in the near future when we see more details getting disclosed. But overall, yeah, that's really not more we can say about this. So happy days for Manchester City. So those are my thoughts for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.